What's up, people? True Techno Gamer right before the end of 2025, and I had to get this video out. This is another big one. My 2-month review, if you want to call it that, of these babies, the Perlisten D215s subwoofers. Now, these things are meant to be flagship. They're super expensive. They're a luxury item. But do they deliver? Right? I don't have a ton of experience with subwoofers in my day. I've had a few over the years, but I've been rocking SVS subs now for the last roughly, 17 years or something like that. Do these deliver an in-game experience? Because that's what it's about for me, guys, right? Well, I think I have an interesting answer for you guys. Let's get into the details right after this. Okay, so let's get right into it, guys. So for this video, I'm going to go into the details. Let me just talk about the specs, make sure everyone is aware of what this subwoofer is, what I have. I'm going to go over the details there. I'm going to talk about what's unique about the sub, these subs in particular, okay? And then I'm going to kind of go through my evaluation, and I'm going to kind of break it down through the key kind of performance metrics for subwoofers and give my take on what I feel they're delivering. And then I'm going to talk about why I feel that these may be my end games. For real, right? Straight up, guys, all right? So what do we have here? So Perlisten is a relatively new company. These subwoofers were, I believe, the first product that they actually came out with, period. Think about that. Brand new speaker company, brand new audio company. Their first product was a subwoofer, and not just any subwoofer, but these flagship subwoofers. At the time when they first came out, roughly 2021, I believe, 2021, 2022 time frame, they came out at $9,000. So Perlisten made a statement right then and there, right? Who they are, what they're representing, and what they're trying to bring to the table, right? They wasn't playing any games, okay? So these things come out, and my experience with them is interesting. I actually first heard them, I want to say that was CAF. It was at Capital Audio Fest, okay, in the DMV area here. 2021, maybe 2022, I can't recall, but one of the two. It was kind of right at the end of the pandemic. It was the first CAF that I had attended, and I had never heard of Perlisten at all. And they had a room, and they had these subs, and basically they were just jamming out. They had a jam session, and they was invite people, and they were blasting and playing music, and different types of music genre, right? No home theater stuff. And I was just like, okay, and they were bragging about it. They were like, oh, these subs are basically, you know, can play anything, and they can play super loud, they can rock the house, and and I stayed there for about 20 minutes listening to some demos, and I wasn't like completely overwhelmed, I'm gonna be honest, right? Again, I didn't know them, I didn't know about the sub, I didn't know the specs or anything like that, but just from listening to them, I didn't hear anything in that room that was like, oh my gosh, these things are, right, the next coming, right? I just didn't hear it. It sounded fine, it definitely played loud and all that good stuff. But it's really hard to distinguish the particular qualities with subwoofers, especially in a venue like that, hotel room, bunch of people. I get it. But then over the years, I kept hearing glowing things about them. Great reviews from folks like Shane Lee and Audioholics. I mean, glowing reviews. Best subwoofer in the world type reviews, right? And I'm like, those are the things that I heard at CAF, right? And so eventually I had a chance to hear them again at like a local dealer here. And, I just kind of paid more attention listening to some of the reviews. And I was kind of like, you know what? I think these have the combination of everything that I could personally want in a subwoofer, the more I paid attention to it, right? So I already put the video out, but you guys heard the story. My SVS SP16 Ultras that I've been rocking, one of them died. One of them, I think the amplifier blew or something to that effect, and is no longer functional. So I was like, well, what do I do? Do I replace it? Do I get the new SVS sub, the SP17 Ultras, or do I go with something else? And ultimately, I decided to go with something else. I wanted something different. I've been rocking SVSs for so long. And again, I, on paper, was like, if I'm going to just get new subs now, at with the room that I'm building, the system I have, the means that I have now, like, I might as well go all in, man. Let's just go all in, go for the end gamer, so I don't have to be thinking about a sub again for a while. Now, mind you, the SP16s did last me 7 years. Okay, I had those subs for 7 years, right? So, and again, they blew up. I wasn't really looking to get a sub right now. So there's no reason why these should not be, 10 plus years, right? Is my goal and my hope there, right? So that was my introduction to Perlisten and to these subs. And now finally having them, I am super happy with these babies, okay? So let's get into the specs and just overview of everything that these things are bringing to the table, right? Now, these subs are basically dual 15-inch drivers, okay? Each driver is made of pure carbon fiber, which is that's the highest quality material, driver material that you can use for sub. You'll see that in, more luxury and expensive flagship subs from the likes of REW, right? And even JTR and other folks. You'll start seeing carbon fiber. These things use two 15-inch carbon fibers. Rigid, sturdy, like highest quality driver you can get. The drivers are in a push-pull configuration. So as you see, they're not just like two drivers stacked one on top of the other, which you kind of see with the likes of like the JTR RS2 or even the JL Audio Fathom and Gotham, the Gotham series, right? And that's kind of cool for me aesthetically because I never liked that dual driver kind of one on top of the other look. It just kind of looks awkward and bulky. I really love the fact that the one driver is actually hidden. So push-pull means that the front driver you see is doing this, and there's a driver inside that's actually going up, right? So it's going up like this, right? And the reason why they do that is because the two drivers inside the cabinet the waves cancel each other out. So essentially, they all but eliminate second harmonic distortion, right? I mean, all but eliminate it, right? So that's pretty awesome. So there's a functional component to it, but it also looks good. And of course, two drivers, in this case, two 15-inch drivers is the equivalent surface area of a 21-inch driver, right? Now I have two of these things, right? So I have essentially two 21-inch driver equivalent, okay, for really deep bass and tons of output, of course, okay? Frequency response on these things, they're rated to go down to about 15 hertz in their deepest configuration. They are configurable, they're different modes. So you can do a large room, a small room, and a THX version, which is kind of in the middle. So with the large room setting, which is actually what I have mine to, because I do have a large room, and it turns out the measurements just work best in this particular room for me. But that's the deepest it'll rate down to, and it's about 15 hertz, right? Which again, no slouch, right? I mean, it's up there with the best, and this is a sealed sub. Of course, with a sealed sub, you can get additional low frequency output with room gain, right? So people have measured these Perlisten subs easily down to 10 hertz and even single digit frequency responses, right? So really wide frequency, they go up to about 200 hertz. And that's also important because of how musical these subs can be, how well they can integrate with your, your main front speakers, right? For music listening in particular, you can, turn the crossover frequency even higher and get a nice blend for a really musical sound. Size-wise, these things are, as you can see, pretty big. They're especially tall because of the dual drivers, and they're pretty deep. Lots of just mass and volume, right, to push a lot of air. That's what you want in a subwoofer. But I love how it's still so elegant. I love the look of these things, right? So size-wise, these things are about 31 inches tall, right? Really tall. 25 inches deep and about 20 inches wide, okay? So I showed you guys before, man, it's like in person is literally almost double the size of that SP16 Ultra I have, if not even more. I mean, and just the sheer volume of the cabinet and the amount of air it can push is just way more, okay? Now, all of that is powered by what Perlisten calls a smart amplifier, and I'm gonna go into that in a second, but 3,000 watts RMS, okay? Basically, again, for the two drivers, you can kind of look at it, maybe it's 1,500 watts each driver, which again, is pretty stout. No problems there in terms of, powering this thing. That's a massive amplifier, of course, for a subwoofer of this size, right? So on paper, everything looks amazing, right? Everything is set up for really, really high output, really, really low frequency, nice, super well built cabinet, all of that stuff that you would want, all right? The sub has all the expected inputs, outputs you typically would expect. It has the balanced XLRs in the back. It also has the unbalanced RCA inputs, of course. There's an LCD screen on the top there, which you can use to interface with. There also is a smartphone app, which is, again, super easy to use, super convenient. The overall user interface and user experience with these subs is just really, really top notch, all right? Not a lot of subs, especially at this price range and kind of in this class, have smartphone apps, and their smartphone app is super easy. The LCD on the top can get you a lot of function as well. One cool thing that it actually has a test tone built in at 40 hertz, which is a good kind of midpoint that you can play directly from the sub to just kind of test if you change any settings or volume or anything like that. I think that's pretty neat. That's pretty cool. It does have a 10-band parametric EQ configuration, which is also pretty cool. Super configurable. You can use that to really dial in individual frequencies, try to even out that frequency curve, of course, directly in the sub. So that's awesome. And of course, the weight of these subs, which says a lot of the story in terms of the build quality here. The weight of these subs, one of these, is 202 pounds, right? This is a super dense sub. I mean, it's big, but 202 pounds, man. Like the SVS SB16 was really, really dense as well. It was for a sub of that size. We were looking at about 112 pounds, right? Which was really good, again, for a sub of that size. We're almost looking at double the weight, and with the same size driver, but two of them, of course, but almost double the weight overall with these things. So to put that number in perspective, the new SVS PB17 Ultra sub, we know how big that sub is, single driver 17-inch woofer, is about 165 pounds, okay? And then to go to another extreme, the JTR RS2, which is dual 18-inch drivers. These are dual 15s, keep that in mind. But that sub is about 220 pounds. But again, two much larger drivers, right? So this thing is pretty robust, needless to say, okay? Let me go into and talk about what is unique about these subs, man. What makes these subs stand out, okay? One of the first things that was kind of a bigger deal when it first came out, because it was the first product, I think, to do this, is that these subs are THX Dominus rated subs. THX Dominus is a brand new specification that debuted with Perlisten coming out with these subs back in 2021, like I said. All right. And it's a brand new specification that goes much further beyond the previous THX Ultra level of certification, right, and specification. So literally it's almost specified as double that, right? Essentially, THX Dominus means that, it passed all kinds of rigorous testing for clean, low distortion output, extreme outputs, right? So it's rated to be able to fill the largest room that THX specifies. That room is about 6,500 cubic feet, okay? Which is crazy. That's a huge, huge room. That's over twice, again, the certification level for the THX Ultra specification, right? And they tested essentially pushing continuous output at about 120 dB SPL. That's above reference, right? That's beyond reference, which is usually about 115, okay? So they're pushing it and they're measuring that it has low distortion output at 120 dB, right? And it's also rated, what these speakers are, the sensitivity needs to be pretty high. This is the highest level that THX has ever specified, which is that these subs are 92 dB efficient, okay? So that's super efficient, again, speaking to how much volume they can push. So again, that's a unique thing. That was kind of more of a selling point, of course, but it just speaks to the fact that these things have been certified, tested rigorously from Perlisten, and in this case from THX as well, to say that they can play loudly with low distortion and fill a very, very large room, right? That's basically what that says, right? The other thing that makes these subs pretty unique, again, is that smart amplifier that I mentioned earlier. Now, what does it mean to have a smart amplifier? Well, these subs have a really, really advanced, one of the most advanced in the industry, DSP engines, digital signal processor. So essentially, the amplifier has a built-in computer right on the amp, okay? And this computer is monitoring everything about the sub 1,000 times per second, right? It's constantly. Everything from the voltage, coming from the wall, the excursion of the driver itself, right? Which, by the way, these drivers are rated at plus or minus 30 millimeters X max, that's a lot, right? These things can move again, and that's how you get a lot of that output, right? So 30 millimeters, again, nothing to sneeze at for sure. But this DSP is going to monitor how the driver is moving, what power is needed from the amplifier, what power is coming out from the amplifier, what the levels of distortion, are, what the input frequency signal is, and what has to be played, and the temperature, and everything you could think of, right, about the driver and the amp is monitored by this computer. And the reason why they're doing that is because the computer essentially is the engine, right? It's driving everything in one cohesive matter, right? Like the amplifier and the driver, making sure that it's moving adequately and is efficient for what it needs to do, right? Based on the incoming signal, right? If it's a lower signal, you might need more X max, for example. You might need more amplifier power. But if it's a higher frequency signal, you might not need as much, and it might throttle things down. So this is about efficiency. It's about how it can use that power. This is the reason why the 3,000 watts is not necessarily apples to apples to what you might see in most other brands, right? Because it's not a continuous 3,000 watts. It doesn't need to be. It never needs to be, right? If it needs 3,000 watts, it can do that, right? For like a real dynamic peak or something like that. But more often than not, it's going to just deliver what it needs to, right? But the point of this is, and the thing that's really unique about these subs is that these subs are on basically a very tight leash, so to speak, right? Perlisten is setting up that DSP to make sure that no matter what happens, no matter what the environment is and what the situation is, that these subs never distort in a meaningful way, right? The threshold is tight in terms of how much distortion they're letting the subwoofer get. And the reason why they're doing that is because they want to make sure that you always get the cleanest power, the most accurate, tightest, true to the signal playback, right, that you can get. And they go further than almost every other company out there when it comes to that, right? Everybody wants to get tight, accurate bass, of course, and everything. But they're willing to sacrifice SPL, right? No problem. Without hesitation, right? The system will throttle down, reduce the amount of amplifier power, reduce the amount of driver excursion, whatever they need to do if it gets to a point where the driver and the system is just distorting beyond a certain point. And that point is vanishingly low, okay? All the reviews for this sub has shown, Audioholics called this sub the most accurate sub in the world when they reviewed it about 3 years ago now. But even since then, not really much else has supplanted that, at least not in that regard. They were amazed. You can see the numbers on their website. I'll link it here in this review. But they were just amazed at the accuracy, the level of distortion, even at the 20 hertz range, even at the sub 20 hertz range, the infrasonic range, right? You still were barely over 10% total harmonic distortion, which is insane, right? Most subs at 20 hertz, 15 hertz, you're going to be looking at 30, 40, 50% total harmonic distortion, right? These things barely went over 10, even under in the infrasonic ranges. And that's at like the extreme levels, right? That's at the point where you're hitting the limits of these subs. If you just, which I never do, by the way, right? So if you just throttle the volume down a little bit, and they showed some numbers where they just turned the volume down a little bit, minus 3 dB. And I mean, they were like, I think they maxed out at 6% total harmonic distortion, even under 20 hertz. That's just insane. So that's what the smart amplifier and that DSP engine is really about, okay? Making sure that no matter what the signal is, no matter what the frequency is, 15 hertz, 12 hertz, whatever it is, anything you hear from these subs, it's just going to be supremely accurate and tight and consistent. Because physics dictate that typically what happens is as you get lower in frequency response from most subs, the amount of distortion goes up because the subwoofer has to work harder. Amplifier has to work harder. The driver has to work harder to reproduce a 25 hertz signal, for example, compared to a 50 hertz signal, right? And that's just physics, right? So as that happens, things start to get more and more out of control. And then as you get definitely into infrasonic ranges, which not every sub can even do, it really breaks apart. And then that's usually when you hit, kind of like the breaking point for most subs. These things down to their 15 hertz rating, they are just tight, accurate. I mean, it's amazing. Okay. So those are kind of some of the unique things, okay, about these subs. Now, I'm going to kind of talk about at least 3 key pillars of performance evaluation in my experience, okay? When you think about a sub performance, 3 areas come to mind. 1 is output, okay? So SPL, how loud can it play? How much can it rock? That kind of thing, right? 2 is frequency response. In this case, for subs in particular, how deep can it play, right? How low can it get, of course, right? And then 3, how accurate can it play, right? How tight is the bass in that case, right? So accuracy, quality of the bass, the frequency response, right? The actual how low can it go, and then the actual output, okay? So thinking about those 3 things, let me start with the output, because to me that's pretty obvious. And this is one that is kind of important and kind of near and dear to me, because as I was researching the sub and as I started putting stuff out there on forums and everything and talking to people in person, one of the key complaints I heard about these subs is that, gosh, like they're great, they look great, they're built well, but they don't really play that loudly, in particular in the infrasonic range. They don't play that loudly. That's one of the kind of ongoing complaints about these subs. Okay, now I'm going to address that now as an owner of these subs for 2 months or more now, right? Now, I am not the biggest bass head. There are people out there, you guys know, you're watching this, there are people out there that have 12, 16 subwoofers in their house, 18-inch subwoofers in their house, and all kinds of craziness. I don't know, right? What do you do with like 12, 18-inch subwoofers in a home, in a room smaller than this, smaller than mine? I don't get it. So people are clearly bass heads, and I think those are the people that largely complain about these subs, because the main design goal for these subs is not about delivering the utmost in SPL, in volume, right? That's not the design goal. The design goal for these subs is to deliver the best overall sound quality, accuracy, for bass that you can get across all frequency ranges and across any or most, reasonable volumes, right? But it's going for accuracy and precision. That's what these subs are about, okay? So that said, let's talk about some numbers out here first for a second, right? I mentioned these subs are THX dominant certified. That means that these subs can play 120 hertz at most of the subwoofer range. In fact, Audioholics, again, in their extensive review for this sub, go back and look at it. Their long-term compression tests showed that this sub was able to output 120 dB pretty much continuously from about 40 hertz up to above 100 hertz. 120 dB above reference. That's way beyond reference, right? No other sub at the time of that review, they said that was the loudest, right? Sealed sub in particular that they had ever tested. Okay. What more do you want? Right now, when you get down to 20 hertz and get down to the infrasonic range, it's still super loud, guys. Right? The CEA numbers for this thing shows that at 20 hertz, this thing's outputting 106 dB. A single one. Now, mind you, I have 2, right? Which is even going to do. I'm probably going to be getting closer to 110 dB, right? At 20 hertz. Now, yes, there are subs out there, DIY subs, and probably some others that can do 115, 16 around 20 hertz for sure. I don't play I don't know what y'all do, seriously, right? But I don't play my subs at that level. These subs I play them at, like I said, I don't listen to my system typically much more beyond -20. That's loud to me in my system, -20. So that's probably something closer to like 95 dB. I might push maybe 100 dB, right? I'm not pushing the extreme. So I'm just saying, for me at least, I don't need a sub that can really go crazy at the extremes like that, right? Like, that's not even a criteria for success in my mind, right? I don't do that, right? So for me, 100 dB, 105, maybe I'm pushing, right? In some cases. And this thing can do 105 dB. This thing can do pretty much, again, in its full listed frequency range. So down to about 15 hertz. This thing can still put out about 105 dB, especially with the two in this room, right? So for me, that just doesn't even calculate. No comprende. It doesn't make sense. Okay, like these things are super loud for me. Now, again, there are some crazy bass heads out there, so maybe not for everybody, but for 99% of people with normal human ears, I cannot imagine how you can have these subs and complain that they're not loud enough. Right now, again, you can say that they don't play loud at 10 hertz compared to, you know, something else, or if that's your focus, if infrasonic range is only your focus, which some people are, then yeah, you want to probably go with a hard bottle or RBH or something like that, that are designed for like under 80 hertz, right? In some cases under 60 hertz. That's what they're designed for. So go for that. But these are meant to be, you know, a much broader range, a lot more musical, that can integrate with a much wider set of speakers, right? While still delivering accurate bass throughout the whole thing. That's what these are about. So for me, you know, in terms of the volume, I am super happy with these. They play when they need to. They play super loud. I've shown some demos, stuff like Dune 2, right? Top Gun Maverick, Ready Player One. Of course, I've done the Edge of Tomorrow intro, right? John Wick 4 intro scenes. And these things can rock, but they do it with a level of cleanliness and precision that's hard to explain, right? And I'm gonna get into that in terms of my just specific impressions, but the way it comes out, guys, is just different than anything I've experienced before. It's loud, it's there, but it's never obtrusive, it's never obnoxious, right? It's just there, it's clean. Clean, that's the way I can describe it, right? So I can't, you know, don't have any complaints on the volume. For me, coming from, you know, my previous subs, these things are outputting in general in the infrasonic range or in the low frequency range. These things are giving me at least 6 dB more than what those were doing. That's a lot, by the way. And in general, again, these things are putting out, they're reaching 120 dB. The SVSs were peaking at about 116, even like in the upper ranges. So these, and that's one, again, so, right, so two of these, plenty loud, guys. I mean, this thing is rocking THX dominance, movies, music. I never have felt like I've strained these subs. I've never felt like these subs have broken in a sweat for anything that I've thrown at it. And that's saying a lot because I was scared to death many times with the SVS subs. With some of those torture tests, it just didn't feel comfortable with the SVS subs. I have never, like, that's one of the biggest things I have about these subs, feedback I have about these subs. I have never felt more secure, right? And just playing anything with these subs, right? Like there's nothing that I feel like they can't handle because they play all of those things and it just don't sound like they're losing control. It don't sound like they're straining at all. So that's the volume piece of it, right? Again, the frequency response, the lowness, a lot of that, guys, is room dependent. And here's what I mean. These subs are rated down to 15 hertz. I can confirm I have measured them down to 15 hertz. I've looked at all of their modes. In the large room mode, which is the deepest one, it gets down to about 15 and then it tails off in this room. That's exactly what the spec says, right? Now, the reason why it tails off at 15 hertz in this room is because my room being pretty large and also awkwardly shaped, it's not like a nice rectangular shape that you typically would see in a theater. I don't get much room gain. I barely get any room gain. And that's consistent with what I saw with the SVS subs. The SVS subs also went down to about 15 hertz and then they tailed off, right? So that's my room. Again, people have shown on YouTube and around, the internet, people have shown that Perlisten subs, even the single woofer ones, can get down to 10 hertz, right, in room, right, and even below that, right? So we know that it can happen. I'm just not able to get there in this room. In this room, It's not really pushing much more than what I was used to before. But throughout the frequency range in general, if you look at the curve and, which I've done, and just kind of gauge the output at different places. Again, a lot of that also is some of the tweaking I did with the room correction, some of the things I did with the acoustic panels around the room as well. But I do feel like that overall there's a lot more consistency in my graph, right? So that part is cool. The last piece again is the accuracy, guys, and this is where these subs shine. This is where these subs get their name, so to speak, right? That smart, DSP engine, the smart amplifier. The accuracy from these subs is something that it took me, and it started probably still taking me some getting used to. It took me some getting used to because it sounds different than what I had been previously used to, how I've been consuming bass typically, right? It is just so clean. I don't know how to describe it. But the sound that comes out is fundamentally different than what I heard from the SPS subs, for sure. Notice I said different. It took a while for me to get used to it, to say that it's better, but it was definitely different. And it really has changed how I listen and what I think of some of the content that I listen to. Seriously, there are movies and games and music that I thought sounded a certain way. I just expected it to sound a certain way that I've been used to on those SPS subs, listening to even in my car or wherever else, right? Give you an example. If you guys saw my home theater guest series, right? If you look in that video, the first one episode of that, I was playing some music, right, with my man Randy, and I did some bass heavy tracks, what I call bass heavy tracks. And Johnny Gill, Let's Stay Together was one of the songs I used in that. And I'm using this song because this was one of those songs that in this house on my system previously, with the SPS subs and everything I had for the last 7 years, that song was like almost to the point where I thought that the recording was just bad. I thought something was wrong with the recording, okay? That song was so bass heavy, like just unbalanced. Like I could be listening to a bunch of different music, and I thought I had my system pretty well dialed in before, where I'm listening to a bunch of different music tracks, and then that song would come on and everything sounded nice and balanced. That song would come on and it would just like boom, boom, like I was like, whoa, to the point where I usually had to turn the volume down or turn my subs down. Like that's what that song sounded like, right? The same thing with the My Caffeine song, right, that I showed in that video by Faith Richards. Again, playing that song, but previously it was just like, her voice, the recording of the song sounded like loud, like, just unbalanced, like just extra loud. And the bass just sounded super loud to the point where, again, it dominated the sound. It dominated that song. It wasn't pleasant to listen to be honest, right? And I can go on. There's a bunch of songs like that. There's a bunch of games where there were moments where, again, things were shaking and you're like, that's cool, but it just sounded uncontrolled. And you're like, it's not pleasant, because I felt worried that, again, something was rattling in my room, or the subs didn't sound very stable, right? That kind of thing. Everything else sounded fine, but these certain moments came in and that happened, right? And then I also talk about some movie demos. The intro in John Wick 4 with the SVS subs, the way I had it configured in this room, was scary, right? But not in a good way, right? Right? That thing came on and, again, talk about drawing attention. Everybody looked at the sub, was kind of like, whoa, right? And some people felt it was just too much. I was like immediately reaching for the remote to turn it down, right? To turn the volume down overall, or turn the subs. I mean, that's the effect of that. You know what I mean? I know you guys know what I mean. So with these subs, those examples, like the Johnny Gill song kind of blew me away because I was using it as a bass, like torture test in a way. But played through these things to my system now, that song sounded so much more balanced. It sounded so much more composed. It didn't stand out. It didn't sound like it was a poorly recorded track or just a hot track. It didn't sound like that at all anymore, right? To the point where, my demo for for Randy was kind of like, I'm not sure if he's even getting this, right? Because it was bass, but it wasn't excessive. And the point of that was for me to show like, hey, here's like a crazy bass track. You can hear what's going on in here. It doesn't sound like that at all from these subs. So what does that mean, guys? I've heard that song for over 10 years across multiple systems. It always sounded like that. It always sounded like, okay, got to turn this thing down, or if I just want to just show off my bass in my car even or whatever, right, turn that up. But it sounded like a whole other presentation, quite frankly. I got the same amplifier, I got the same processor, got the same speakers, right? Gotta be the subs, right? Gotta be the subs. If you know, that's the difference of how controlled and clean the bass can be and how that makes a difference to the overall presentation there. Crazy, crazy, man. That's the best thing I can say about these subs. And that's the thing, like, and again, all of those tracks, you know, Faith Richardson sounded so balanced, smooth. It just made it so much more enjoyable to listen to. The bass was still there, but it was not standing out. It was not obtrusive anymore. It was not overbearing, right? That's what these subs are about. That's what the accuracy is about. The biggest thing, okay, the biggest two things that I can say from these subs I keep coming back to. The first is how well they blend into the system. How well they blend in with my front LRs, you know, for home theater and for music 2-channel as well. It is insane. Like, I have never experienced something like this before. Seriously, right? Like, these big, everyone talks about how big they look. Even through the videos, I've seen comments, people would hear like, whoa, what is that? I thought that was a mini fridge, right? Or I thought it was a washer or something crazy, right? But when you're listening to it, you never hear the bass dominating anything. You don't never hear the bass like really drawing attention to itself and trying to, you know, hear me, look at me, hear me roar. It never does that, right? It never. Like, even when I'm just playing around and I've tried to just turn it up, right? I messed with the arc settings to give it more bass boost. I messed with the just to see. It never could sound like that. It never sounds boomy. It never sounds bloated. That has to be that smart DSP, right? It has to be that throttling, keeping that distortion low. Which means that before, with uncontrolled subs, you might get a lot more of that distortion. That's that discomfort that I think I was describing, right, to you guys. And I know you guys know what I'm talking about, right? These things never do that. And not only that, it's just amazing how invisible they are. There's no other better way to put it. Unless I'm thinking about them or I just happen to look at them and I'm like, man, those things look so good, right? But when I'm listening, I'm never thinking about the bass. I'm never thinking about the bass. It's there, right? I can feel it. I showed literally in the YouTube clip with Randy, you saw his pants flapping in the video for I think it was Doom 2, or actually no, it was one of the Atmos demo disc clips. We can feel that. You can feel that bass energy in here. You know it's rocking, but it's never overbearing. And I think that is just exactly what these subs are about. That's the tightness, that's the cleanliness, and just the integration. So the blending, where I'm not even thinking that the sub is even there. And I've talked to people and they say, like, that's the audiophile dream. That's the goal for, especially for music, right? Like for bass, you want it to be seamless where you're not thinking about it. It's just adding what it needs to add to the sound, and you're able to enjoy it without, right, thinking too much about it. Now, contrary, a lot of people want to think about the bass for movies. They want the bass to stand out for movies. And for movies, you know, obviously it stands out a little bit more, but honestly, in most cases, it still doesn't. And that's that's one of the problems I think that a lot of people have with these subs in that regard. They're just so unassuming, right? It goes against what a lot of people look at when they want to get and spend a ton of money on some big, brawly subwoofers, right? That's exactly counter to what JTR, for example, is trying to achieve, right? Big, bombastic, overpowering sound. And I've heard people say that they had GTR and it was too much bass. It was too much. And they sold it and got something else, right? And I mean, again, to each his own. But for me, I definitely prioritize the sound quality, the bass quality over just sheer output. And most of those subs that just can tout that they output 110, 15, 20, whatever dB, 25 dB, they're not doing it with this level of distortion, this level of low distortion, right? I've seen the numbers in many cases. I've done my research. In many cases, they're not doing it. Now, some, are still pretty low. Like, you're not probably going to hear it, at least, and stuff like that. I'm not saying these are the only subs out there that can play clean, of course, but the combination of the cleanliness and the consistency of that throughout the entire frequency range, no matter what input is played, that's, to me, the magic here. Because I've heard subs that, 50 hertz sound great, 40 hertz sound great, but they start to lose their composure, right, as you get lower, right? Or a sub that can play super, super deep at 30 hertz, 20 hertz, right, and under. But then you just play some music at 80 hertz, and it just doesn't keep up well, right? It just doesn't blend in well. Y'all know what I'm talking about. These things blend in perfectly. You just want to be true to the source. If it's something that requires it, Edge of Tomorrow is playing a 10 hertz signal, you should hear the 10 hertz signal, right? If a music track is playing 80 hertz, it should sound like 80 hertz. The bass isn't there, you shouldn't hear dominating bass. If it's not there in the track, right, you shouldn't hear it. That's what these things do, guys, right? So let me wrap this up with why do I feel that these subs are my end game, right? By end game, what do I mean? I mean that I don't feel like there's anything lacking from the actual physical device. In this case, the sub. There are other variables at play. There's rest of my system that may change potentially over time. The room, of course, is a huge thing, especially with bass, that can change over time. But the actual subwoofers themselves, like, why would I put any money towards anything else? What would I gain coming from this, right? That's what I'm thinking about. And for me, I wanted something that, as is typical for me, very balanced, like the best of all worlds. I wanted to get the best possible subwoofer that I can get, essentially, that can hit all of the check marks as much as possible, while still having room to grow, right? In a way where I felt like there was nothing else out there that can do it better, right, or do it more. And I feel like these are that. When I think about SPL volume, these are way beyond what I personally would ever need. I never complained about my SP16s in terms of volume. That was never a complaint of mine. Even though I hit their limits. I know where their limits were. I could hit them. Which is why when I started noticing that, I'm like, well, generally speaking, 98% of the time I'm listening, they were fine. But I know that if I pushed them, I can hear their limits. So for me, that's not quite in game, right? Because I don't have room to grow, right? So these, like I said, I'm getting at least 6 dB more in the low range, at least 4 to 5 dB throughout the entire range. I'm getting way more output, and again, much, much tighter, more controlled output, right? So these fit that bill. What was I looking for? Like I said, I threw the numbers out. I know that on paper, commercially, not DIY, but at least commercially, there are very few sealed subs that can compete with the output of these subs. Commercially, right? You tell me these subs are matching, essentially, trading blows with what was considered the loudest sealed sub on the market for years, for many, many years. You guys know what I'm talking about? The Paradigm Sub 2, right? For many years, that sub was considered the, benchmark in terms of sealed output. And you can look at the numbers, and this sub is trading blows with it, beating it in some cases, right? So that was the standard. Let's go by that metric. That was a standard, right? So, I feel like output-wise, for anything that I would ever need, they're fine. The other thing for me was, for some reason, this is just kind of maybe one of my quirk things, but I like the idea of having dual drivers. Dual drivers means pushing more air. It means more surface area. It means more output, right? So when I thought about the idea of getting, for example, like the SPS SP17, I mean, for a while when we were waiting for SPS to come up with their new flagship, I thought and kind of hoped that they would do a dual driver thing, right? Because they kind of did with the micro, right? That's, that it was a micro, that's like 3000 micro sub, whatever. They did a dual driver thing there. So I'm like, oh, this is a sign of what, where they're going. And, they didn't do that. That's fine. Again, they were trying to hit their price point for sure. But when you look at the market, you look at stuff like the JL Audio Gotham, right? REW recently just released a new 2 dual sub configuration, right? The kind of one on top of the other type configuration. And of course, you see stuff like the JTR RS2 and stuff like that, right? If I had a single sub in my mind, I know that I would have just kind of been like, man, it would be nice to have a dual sub just to have that extra bit of output, just to have that extra bit of headroom, right? So I don't have to worry about it. Again, there's more room that I know I can grow into, right? So I love the idea that these are dual drivers. They fit that just itch that I had. And I also love, like I said, that they're not that's one stack on top of the other. The way it's integrated is just beauty, just beauty. I love it, right? So that's the other thing. And then, of course, in terms of the sound quality, right? That's my priority. I've said that. I wanted something that can be great for movies and great for music. And there's some subs out there that can integrate well and do well for music, but they don't give you that much slam and that much output for movies. I feel like these things do both tremendously well. Again, you can't get much more output and much deeper than what these subs can give you, which is great for movies, but at the same time, the way that it disappears, the way that they can integrate the speed of the sub, the transient response, a group delay, again, for music, it's just next level. It is. But I mean, generally speaking, they are considered to be a benchmark for accuracy, especially in their price range and especially at their size, right? So, right, I mean, where do I go from there, right? I can go smaller and maybe in the future get something more accurate, but then I'm not going to have the output probably, and I'm not going to be able to get right the movie bang, right? So again, best of all worlds type of thing. I feel like these are the best to do that. They do everything, and they do it with such sophistication, such precision, right? Such quality, everything. The user experience, the build quality itself physically, the actual engineering design. These things are the truth. Can't explain it. So I'm not getting super pressurized response in this room. That's not what these subs are about. And again, this room wouldn't let me get that anyway, I think. That's not what it's doing. It's not like, oh my gosh, like, whoo, I'm overwhelmed. Like, I'm never getting that right from these subs in that regard. I do get the pants flapping. I do get some visceral sense where you're just going to put a smile on your face like, whoa, right? That explosion, that tank shell, like fury I talked about sounds so real. It sounds so much different than it did before. It is adding enjoyment to things because it sounds so much more true to the source, so much more smooth and controlled than what I had experienced before for games, for movies, for music, right? So I'm able to listen to a lot more things now and enjoy it in a way that I wasn't able to do that before, right? But these subs aren't, again, dominating ever. They're not going to draw attention to themselves ever. And of course, they are really, really expensive. And that's really the big thing, the big knock on these subs. And that's what people complain about. Yeah, they're great, but for that price, I can do better, right? And I'm not here to argue with that, right? I'm not. You know, JTR is less than half the price, right, for an RS1, and has generally the same level of SPL output, right? Not the same level of accuracy and distortion. I can tell you that for the same frequency, same output. But you can get louder for sure with the JTR. No question, it's going to sound probably just way more visceral for movies in particular, but it's probably not going to sound as well integrated for music. Right? I'm just saying, right? Now, and it doesn't have to anywhere near the build quality and aesthetics. I can say that too. So, right? It's always some trades, right? You got to take it or leave it. But these are not the best value. There's no question about that. These are not the best value. I'm not going to vouch for that. I'm not going to object to that. These are a luxury product. These are luxury subs. And that's another element of Endgame, right? When you get to a level where I've been blessed to be, where you can say, you know what? I don't have to get the best value product right necessarily, but something where I look at it, I touch it, I sit with it, and I'm just like, you know what? It's just great to have these things. It just is a joy to just own them and feel them. There's something to be said for that. That's not true with everything, right? But these subs fit that bill. When I just look at them, when I listen, I'm just like, they're just a pleasure to own, right? I feel the same way about the Paradigm Personas. I feel the same way about the LG G497. Not a great value. I'm not going to just justify the money spent for a TV like that, or even speakers like that, or even something like the Hi-Fi Rose. There are plenty of streamers that are a fraction of the cost of that thing, right? But I tell you that having them physically in my house and in my presence, every time I look at them, I feel something. Every time I touch them, I feel something. That's the intangible thing that luxury items bring. That's what, right? Like, that's what your Mercedes or Porsche may bring over a Honda Civic or a Corolla, right? Still go from A to B, and you can have a great looking Corolla, trip it out or whatever, but there's something about those details, something about just the feel of ownership. And these subs bring that. And I'm gonna tell you guys, they do. They bring that. As much as I've ever could imagine having from a subwoofer. Because usually you don't think about subwoofers like that. It's like they're a box, sit there in the corner, don't have to look at them, don't have to pay attention to them. In this case, I want to look at them. In this case, I want to pay attention to them, even though they don't want attention drawn to themselves, right? So, guys, what can I say? I'm happy. I'm really happy with these. I feel like our journey is just beginning. I feel like I have a lot of room to grow with these, again, especially in a different room where I can probably get more room gain in some cases, or maybe even turn them up even more. They have the headroom to allow me to do that. They have the ability to integrate in the future. If I did swap out these lovely Persona speakers for something else, I have no doubt that I can integrate these subs with whatever speakers I get, right? That's what these are about. Transforming how certain things sound. In many cases, sound like I'm listening to things for the first time. That's awesome. And I just feel like they are absolutely indestructible. They are bulletproof. I've said that before. I don't ever feel concerned playing anything with these subs. They're handling it with just a bomb, like near perfection. And that's cool. That's comforting. That's part of that luxury experience I'm talking about as well. So shout out to Perlisten. I really am a believer now in what these subs can do. I still feel like I have a long way to go with them, right? And I'm going to learn a lot more with them, for sure. But my just 2-week evaluation, my 2-week feel for them, haven't had some time to get used to them, haven't had some time to listen to more things with them. 2 thumbs up. I am satisfied, and I really, truly do feel that there is nothing else out there in terms of subwoofers that can give me what I want better than these, that can deliver on the things that are important to me more than these, aesthetically, user experience-wise, and performance-wise. So for me, that's why these are my endgame. So that's all for now. Guys, let me know. Talk to me. Hit me up in the comments, questions. Any Perlisten owners out there, let me know your experiences, please. I'd love to hear that. Anybody in the market for subs, let me know if you have any other questions. I'll give it to you real. Again, plenty of great subs out there, dude, no question. So just think about what you want. Think about your price point. You know, there's plenty of stuff out there to get you happy, but Perlisten are the real deal. That's all for now. Happy New Year. Till next year, signing off.